Calaroga Shark Media.
Hey, I'm Johnny Mac. This is the normal Sunday morning episode. There was a bonus Jimmy Kimmel episode around 3:30 Saturday afternoon. There will be a bonus episode around noon today on Sunday. We'll cover some other topics in this episode, although Tim Dillon on his podcast did chime in about Jimmy Kimmel, but it's not why I'm leading off with Dillon. Stay for it. But first, Dillon said, "It's wrong to pretend it's because Kimmel's show sucked or it was losing eyeballs or money. Both true," adds Tim Dillon. "Clearly, it was a politically motivated hit job. Also, this morning I was fired from the Riyadh Comedy Festival because of the comments on my podcast." I had pulled the audio, but Tim, he's got an hour to kill, so he told the story very slowly, so I thought it would just be more efficient if I just tell you what he said. Now, pay attention here because the locations can get quite confusing. I am quoting from the Apple podcast transcript of Tim Dillon's program that he published on Saturday, episode 462. The transcript reads, "I was supposed to perform in Dubai. I mixed up Dubai and I said Abu Dhabi. Apparently this is a big deal over there. This is like a real problem. My agent called me and he goes, 'You said on Joe Rogan that you were performing in Abu Dhabi and you're actually performing in Dubai. There's cities and they have a rivalry.' And I go, 'Dude, who gives a bleep? I made a mistake. This is not a malicious slander. It's a mistake.' And he goes, 'Well, they're very angry and they sent an email that you need to be controlled.' I said, 'Well, good luck. Whatever, I don't have to do it. I don't care.' And he called me a few days later, and I thought he was going to talk about the Kimmel thing. But he called me and said, 'They heard what you said about them having slaves.' And then Tim, as I read it, looks like he went into a bit. Anyway, Tim Dillon will not be performing at the Riyadh Comedy Festival. We'll get into that tomorrow. A headline making the news. Now, I am recording this on Saturday afternoon. At this moment, I have not seen Joe Rogan weigh in on Jimmy Kimmel. But what is making the rounds in the media is Joe Rogan saying he's not a Republican. This is from his interview with Jordan Jensen. Now, that was published. Let me just pull out my phone. Now, that episode was published on September 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, according to the Apple Podcast app. I believe it was recorded earlier when Jordan's special was coming out. I remember reading a story, I think on this podcast, that Jordan was going to be on the Rogan show. So I don't think this was recorded this week. Again, I was in the studio. Maybe they went back and taped another segment. Maybe there's two Jordan Jensen recordings. I don't know, but I'm just, I want to give Rogan the benefit of the doubt here that I think this was said before any of the Kimmel stuff came out. Jordan Jensen asked Joe Rogan, "Weren't you like a Bernie bro?" Rogan said, "I've only voted Republican once in my life. The idea that you have to be a Republican to get into that club," meaning his comedy club, "is so ridiculous. That club is filled with gay people, black people, straight people, white people, Asian. Nobody gives an F. You're just doing comedy." Rogan mentioned he has had dinner with conservatives such as Tucker Carlson. Jordan Jensen asked if he was a Bernie bro. Bernie Sanders is a notable Democrat. Rogan said, "Look, the idea of socialism is wonderful if everybody had their stuff together and everybody was disciplined, but it's not the case, and I think that human nature, unfortunately, you're going to need some socialism, though, right? You're going to need the fire department." Like, this is one of the things I point to all the time. People say, "Oh, socialism doesn't work." The fire department is an entirely socialist idea. Like, we all pay into it, and they take care of everybody's fire, right? You can't have only the rich people have a fire department. Then the poor people, their house burns down all the time. That's crazy, right? We all agree to that. Rogan suggested we apply that logic to healthcare, saying, "Are we a effing community or are we not? And if we're a community, you have to take care of the downtrodden and you have to do it because it's bad for them and it's also bad for you. We're all in this together. So you have a social safety net." I believe in all that. But I also believe you just can't give people free money because then they rely on it and they become dependent on it and then it takes away their ambition. Then they don't do anything. That's true too. That doesn't mean you're not compassionate. I don't like either one of these parties, said Joe Rogan. I don't think there's a solution that's correct. I think you have overcorrection after overcorrection. I think the country goes one way and then it swings hard the other way. Everyone is so tribal. Everyone's so locked into their idea that they're the good guys and they're the bad guys. I'm going to jump in here because it's been a very political week. And the show is called Daily Comedy News because when I started it 7 years ago, I was just doing leftover stories from my show on Live One, which is called The Weekly Comedy Thing. And I had leftover stories, and I just called this Daily Comedy News because, like everything, it evolves over time. And the universal design was, hey, Jerry Seinfeld's on tour. Here's some information. I'm trying the best I can to stay out of politics. I think if you listen hard enough to my intonations and my pauses, you might be able to possibly, perhaps, maybe glean onto some of my opinions. But I also know you don't come here for politics, and I'm not trying to chase anyone away. I have in the past, and I will continue to say, I think comedy is an effective way to comment on current events and politics. Even the kings had court jesters, and often the jesters had somewhat free rein to make fun of the king. This point being, this is a commentary show, and sometimes I do parody, and sometimes I exaggerate things for bits. I always explain to people, let me just drop the act for a second. Does John McDermott like Adam Sandler comedies? No. Do I ramp it up as Johnny Mac for the bit? Yes, obviously, and I hope you pick up on that. Do I put down the microphone and walk around the house all day going, I can't believe Adam Sandler made a movie called Jack and Jill Kerr? I don't. I don't. I'm sorry if I ruined the bit. So I am commenting on things, and I am doing parody on things, and in some form, this show is about comedy. So don't take this as the news. I guess much like Jon Stewart says, the Daily Show's not the news. This show isn't the news either. I'm commenting on the news. Now, when I'm telling you who's playing at a comedy festival, I better remember to put that in today's script so I don't have to get the bot out again. That's clearly news, but some of these things are commentary. David Letterman had a lot to say the other day. One thing I haven't been able to share with you the other day was his opinion on the New York Times and the Washington Post. Here's what David Letterman had to say.
These two standards of journalism in the United States, the Post and the Times. And right. One could think, okay, these will stabilize. These are people who represent the truth. And if they get it wrong, they apologize and will make changes. And now one is gone. I have family members who live in the Washington, D.C. Area, and you're lucky if you get the crossword and weather, out of the Washington Post.
And speaking of Adam Sandler, from the Carolinian, a review from the other day, they write, my dad and I bonded watching Sandler films like Happy Gilmore and Mr. Deeds. I'm sorry. My mom and I love Sandler's rom-coms, such as 50 First Dates and The Wedding Singer. I'm on Team Mom there because those are two of the 5 good Adam Sandler movies, which are those two, Uncut Gems, Basketball Movie, Space Alien Movie. Those are the only 5 good Adam Sandler movies. We all know this, well established on this program. The writer says, my family pretty much snuck in Sandler movie lines into every conversation. I guess you could say Adam Sandler was part of the family. So you can imagine my excitement when my boyfriend surprised me with Adam Sandler tickets. They sat at the top of the arena. I looked down at all the people dressed in their best Sandler attire, mostly basketball shorts and a baggy shirt or an orange jersey straight out of The Waterboy. I will make it a point to say I'd never seen Sandler stand up. Aside from the skits and bits he did on SNL, I was walking into a whole new Sandler experience I'd never witnessed before. I'm sorry. I hope this went okay for you. The show began with a variety of stand-up openers, including Rob Schneider and Kevin Nealon. Most of Sandler's openers joked about their lives as 60-year-old men with wives and kids. Although I was not the target audience for that core material, I thought many of the jokes were funny. And they did not diminish my excitement for the evening. Finally, Sandler came out in black jogger pants and a worn-out green sweatshirt. Sandler's routine consisted of his complaints about getting older and conversations he would have with his wife and teenage daughters. And his teenage daughters, 2 of the up-and-coming actresses in Hollywood. They get a lot of work. A lot of times they're Sandler films, but they're up-and-comers. No Nepo babies there. No. Oh, no, she writes. Periodically, Sandler would burst into song. I'm so sorry. Discussing topics such as socks being too tight and a hypothetical grandma being on Ozempic. Live and in person, I realized that Sandler's stand-up was slightly different from the family man he plays in films. His comedy was uniquely his, turned up to 11. In the third act, Sandler strummed his guitar, singing along with the audience. I'm sorry. That's the part I never got from his HBO special. I think he had one. At some point, I remember a million years ago watching a Sandler concert, and he's doing these dumb songs, and the audience is acting like it's Springsteen, and I'm like, what is even happening here? My boyfriend and I raced to the car. After the show, my boyfriend and I raced to the car and discussed our experience with Sandler's performance. I thought some songs dragged on for too long and not much of the comedy I could relate to, but I enjoyed the lively experience nonetheless. Hi, it's Johnny Mac Bot again. You can tell he's distracted by this Kimmel stuff because he forgot to put JFL Toronto in the script 2 days in a row. Today at 4:30, it's the wonderfly titled Age Against the Machine, The Old Faces of Comedy. 6 o'clock, Big J Okerson. At 7, Sarah Milken again. Also at 7, the ever-so-serious Harry Conde Beaulieu, I hope I said that right, since I'm an AI. At 7, Dakota Ray Hebert, and I may or may not have said her name right, but there has been good buzz on her. At 8:30, Big J again. At 9, the ever-so-serious Hari again. Now back to Human John, but let's not act like he doesn't get names wrong all the time. Boy, my football picks better be good today. I am behind a friend of the show, Scott Beckett, who wrote me into this football pool. And I got to tell you, when you're behind Scott Beckett in the football pool, you're having a bad day. Let me see how I'm doing coming into today's games. Well, I got Thursday night's game wrong. Nice job not covering Buffalo Bills. Thanks. So I'm already in last place this week. How we doing overall? Johnny Mac, 56th out of 59. And that Scott Beckett guy's in 45th. I will catch you, Scott Beckett. We have many weeks left. Speaking of football, see how I set that up? Jeremy Piven spoke to Patriots Wire, your home for comedy news. Jeremy Piven said, I just remembered Tom Brady. He's one of those guys where you can just tell from being around him different variables as to why he was so insanely successful. He's a guy who looks you in the eye. He knows everybody's name. You could tell that you want to go to battle for a guy like that. It's a variable that made him so great. Jeremy Piven suggested Tom Brady was an inspiration. If you work your butt off and you do 5 to 8 comedy shows a week, a couple hundred shows a year, and like my mother who quoted Shakespeare when he said, the readiness is all, if you're ready, then you can be present and have a great time. It's really the mixed martial arts of any arena in the way that you got to be ready. You got to be ready for whatever's thrown at you. If there's a heckler, you got to call an audible. Piven was playing Boston and said, in honor of Boston, Tom Brady, he's now kind of opened up about what his process was, and he understood that he needed to study the defense so they knew at any moment the way a linebacker was favoring his waist or a DB or a corner, he knew them inside and out. No one really worked harder to study tendencies. Brady wasn't the most physical, and he wasn't just prepared. He was ready. I think if you grind and you work your ass off, then you can have fun. Gronk was a lunatic. He's like the people's champ. Like if you look up on set and you're like, where's Gronk? He suddenly got a hairnet on. He's serving soup to the extras. And you're like, what in God's name is going on with him? He's drinking adult beverages, losing his mind. And I have to go pick up my son at the train. So that's the end of today's episode. Now, the last time I went to this very train station, Jimmy Kimmel lost his gig. So I'm kind of afraid to go to the train station. All kinds of horrible comedy news could happen while I leave my basement for just 15 minutes. But if something does happen, I promise to you, I will do a bonus episode. Speaking of which, I'll be back in a few hours with a bonus episode about Jimmy Kimmel. See you then.